Good morning. What a great week we had last week with VBS, and you can see here some of the things that one of the things that we accomplished at VBS is amassing a great number of cans that have been donated by the kids, and so that was an encouragement. But after the week, I hope that you and your kids or grandkids were able to find some deep sleep Friday and Saturday night. I want to just give a special shout out. I know we could special shout out everybody, but I don't know how many people were fed during the course of the VBS week. It was an awful lot, and a lot of people helped with that. But can we give Trish Pate a round of applause for all of the coordination that went involved in feeding us very well. Now there are countless other people that participated in a number of ways, and I just appreciate so much what every single person did. I do want to say that one of the things about VBS that I appreciate so much, and I hope that we all appreciate, is that we had half of the kids basically that were coming were visitors and not regular visitors that are coming to our church regularly, but instead people from the community that had a connection somehow or just found a post on Facebook or whatever the case might be. But one of the things that I appreciate so much is that there are some children in particular that find in a VBS a kind of oasis during the midst of their life, world, summer. Not every child is obviously coming from the same background and the same home life, and for a few hours a day for a week we get to love on them and bless them and share with them, and I don't think that is an impression that can be quantified on a spreadsheet or a count or a number, but to think about the love that we're able to show to the kids that come through our doors, whether they're in our church family or whether they're in our community, what a blessing that is. So a huge thank you to all of the volunteers that made it possible, the VBS committee, everybody that was involved in that. Too many to name, but a wonderful job done. I also want to tell you that we have a singing tonight at 5 p.m. You can bring finger foods, dessert, drinks, whatever. We also have a good bit of leftover food, and so there'll be some of that as well. And so we're looking forward to 5 p.m. gathering together and ending the week. I know it's not a technical week, but ending the week in fellowship and joy over a great week that we've had together. We're talking about marriage this morning, as we have been for the last few weeks. We've got one more week left. And we've talked for the last couple of weeks about commitment in marriage, and now we're moving to the next element. We talked about, there we go. We talked about commitment. That's supposed to be a knot there. Now we're moving to the second of three. We'll have one more next week. But one of the things in Genesis 1 and 2 that makes me both marvel at God's wisdom and also kind of laugh is the way that God chose to bring Adam and Eve together. God could have chosen to do that in any number of ways. He's God. He could have organized things however he wanted to. But in Genesis 1, God creates just as he created humans, right? Male and female, he created them in the image of God, he created them. But in chapter 2, we get the details of how this story unfolds. And what I find so fascinating in this story, well, I'll just focus on a couple of things because there's so much there. Let me start by asking you this. How many of you, without any further prompting, know something interesting that happened at the 1997 Macy's Day Parade? 1997 Macy's Day Parade. All right, let me give you a clue what happened, okay? Does this mean anything to anyone? A couple people, okay? If maybe you weren't around then, or maybe you've forgotten, but this is a 60-foot tall Barney, and this poor Barney he's walking, okay, all of these are people right here, and there's ropes connecting to Barney, and they're all trying to hold Barney back, right? and they're going down the street, and the wind is really blowing, and they didn't measure Barney correctly in terms of his aerodynamic features, because Barney is getting drifted. He's drifting everywhere down that street, and the people holding on, you see some people leaving the ground. They're trying desperately to keep a hold of Barney. I don't think you can see it in this picture. It might be this right here, but there is a light pole that is sadly going to end the 60-foot Barney's life. He is going to be just hurled into a light post that is going to pop the balloon, and the helium is, I don't know how many tens of thousands of pounds of helium are in this Barney here, but it's all going to come out, and Barney is going to very depressingly float to the ground and put a interesting twist on the Macy's Day Parade. That's not how you want a big parade to go. What's interesting? What does that have to do with Genesis? What's interesting to me about the way that God chose to bring Adam and Eve together is that God chose to have a sort of parade for Adam. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." Now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock, to the birds of the heavens, to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper fit for him. God causes every living creature to make its way to Adam to receive a name, but not for the purpose of receiving a name. It's not good that the man should be alone. There was not found a helper fit for him. There's a parade of animals that comes one after the other. Can you imagine Adam standing there in this story as the Lord brings him all the garden animals? And listen, we pay good money. We probably pay too much money to go to the zoo, right? We like to walk around and see like 10 animals far away, and Adam gets to see all the animals that God has created flock to him, come to be named by him. What an incredible experience that must have been for him. But for Adam, there was not found a helper fit for him. Adam was alone. Adam did not find a companion. As an aside, Eve is referred to in this translation and others as a helper, some translations a helpmeet, and there's various ways people try to translate that term. Some take that to mean that Eve was in some way inferior to Adam. She was his helper. The main person, though, to whom the word helper refers to, that Hebrew word refers to in the Old Testament, is God himself. So the idea is partnership, companionship, friendship. There is no wonder to me that God chooses in Genesis 2:21, the next verse, to give us another interesting way of producing this relationship. The Lord causes Adam to sleep, and while he slept, he took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord had taken from the man he made into woman and brought her to the man. It's no wonder that God creates Eve out of Adam's rib. They were going to stand beside each other as equals who have their unique gifts and talents as being created male and female, and yet to be equal bearers of the image of God. As people have observed in reading this story, the story reveals to us that much more than the need for money or the need for material or the need for education or knowledge or power, it was loneliness that chiefly caused God to say, "It is not good." Loneliness. No companion, no partner, no friend. That was the essential thing that was not yet good in God's world. This is what very much like what we read in the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon, if we were brave enough to read it, right? But it's the kind of thing we find in the song. The bride in Song of Solomon chapter 5 is asked by her friends, What is so special about your husband? What is so special about this guy? You could have chosen anybody. What's so special about that guy? Of course, you don't have any friends to whom you would like to ask the same question, right? You have no friends that you would say, what did you see in that guy, But nevertheless, that's what they ask her. What's so special about that guy? She launches into a wonderfully poetic description of her husband from head to toe. I could read it for you. It'd probably make you blush, okay? But she describes him. But here's how she concludes her statement in the song. This is from Song of Songs 5:16. It's the second half. It's the conclusion of the poem. She says, after describing this person, this is my beloved, or my lover. This is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. It's here that she looks at her relationship and she says, this man is my beloved and this man is my friend, my companion, my partner. When we think about marriage, we think about marriage as commitment, yes, but we also ought to think of marriage as companionship, and we do think of marriage as companionship. I want to tell you this morning just a little bit of research. Over 80% of engaged and or newlywed couples say that their partner is their best friend. Over 80% of engaged and newlywed couples say that their partner is their best friend. Researchers have also found that the degree to which spouses are friends is the most significant factor in a love that lasts. Are these two people friends? Do they have companionship? That's the most significant factor according to much of the research that's out there. But here's the bad news. The bad news is the percentage of couples who name their spouse as their best friend declines as time passes. So over the duration of the average marriage, couples are prone to decreasingly identify their spouse as their friend or their closest friend. And we might ask the question, why is that? Markman, Stanley, and Blumberg say, does marriage kill friendship? What's going on in this scenario? Well, the biggest factor is that couples simply stop having time for each other, or put it differently, stop making time for each other. In the busyness of life, the marriage becomes part of the business of life. In the busyness of life, the marriage becomes part of the business of life. Conversation begins to change in the relationship, focusing primarily, sometimes exclusively, on the problems and issues of life, and often the problems and issues between the spouses. And this leads couples toward conflict. And unfortunately, conflict without a context of a thriving friendship often leads to isolation and withdrawal between the two people. And because when I talk to you, we fight, and I want to pull away from that, I actually no longer want to talk to you. And that fuels more isolation and more neglect, and pretty soon the friendship is all but gone. So to answer the question, how does friendship die in a relationship? It's both good and bad news. A friendship dies in a marriage slowly. Neither partner makes a decision to stop being friends, but the relationship is neglected to the point that one day the spouses wake up and say, "Who are you again?" I like how Tim Keller describes friendship. He identifies 3 qualities of friendship. There are others, but these 3 qualities say a lot. I don't have a verse for all of these. You can search Proverbs about this and you'll find them. But the first quality he identifies in a friend is the idea of constancy or consistency. The idea behind that, the mentality is, I won't let you down. A friend is there for you when you need them. The second element is transparency. I will be there when you need. I won't let you down, and I will let you in. I will engage you. I will show you who I am. I won't let you down. I will let you in. But it's the last of these that Keller points to as being extremely important in marriage, and as such I point to as well. And it's the idea that friendship is based around a shared vision or passion. That marriage is based on a shared vision, or friendship, I should say, is based on a shared vision or passion. And it's the last, this point here, that is worth taking a moment to ponder. How does friendship develop in the world? Friendship develops over a shared interest or passion, over something that you have in common together. And the depth of friendship, if you follow with me here, the depth of friendship is tied to the depth of that thing that you have in common with someone else. In other words, I can be friends with someone who loves the Colorado Avalanche. You can't, but I can, because I have that in common with them. I can't be friends with someone who likes Detroit Red Wings, right? But you won't even get that humor, okay? Somebody watching the live stream is like, okay, that's funny. I can be better friends with someone who loves The Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien, because it means more to me than the Avalanche, and it's much more spiritual. I can be better friends still with someone who loves Jesus Christ. Friendship, though, is always about something, even if that interest is giving advice on parenting, whatever the interest is, something brings you together. In other words, you don't say, I'd really like a friend, and somebody says, oh, I'd really like a friend too, and you look each other in the eyes and you say, let's meet once a week and tell each other that we like being friends. Okay, I really like being your friend. Well, I like being your friend too. Isn't this friendship lovely? This friendship is lovely. I'm glad we're friends. Yes, being a friend with you is really good, right? That's not about anything. You're just in the same room together. Friendship is always about something. It's about navigating life, or it's about watching sports, or it's about going on hikes, but it's always about something. This is how C.S. Lewis puts it. He says, that is why those people who simply want friends can never make any. The very condition of having friends is that we should want something else besides friends. Friendship must be about something, even if it were only an enthusiasm for dominoes or white mice. Those who have nothing can share nothing. Those who are going nowhere can have no fellow travelers. To remain friends with your spouse, or to become friends again with your spouse, requires that your marriage relationship be about something. There are practical ways to improve being a friend with your spouse, making time for each other, putting conflict aside to say we don't want to just talk about issues and problems, talking as friends, having fun. Those things are all good. But they're not the way to have the ultimate friendship and thus the best marriage. What is your marriage for? That's the question I want to ask you today. What is your marriage for? Is your marriage for sex or children or financial stability or social status? These reasons and all the others provide marriage with a very wobbly foundation. Children, for example, grow up and leave home. Or perhaps you are unable to have children with your spouse. What happens then? What happens when you can't have children? Or what happens when you have children and the children grow up and leave the house? What happens to the marriage then? When that happens, marriages unfortunately often fall apart. Why? Because the couple realize our marriage was about children. I'm just using children as an example. Our marriage was about children. That's what our friendship was based on. And they're out of the house and we've got nothing in common. It's over. What do we have left? What is your marriage for? In Ephesians 5, I'll put something on this slide in just a second, but in Ephesians 5, Paul pictures marriage as two people who are radically committed to the spiritual flourishing of the other. Unfortunately, we lose the power of what Paul says to specifically to husbands to love their wives because it seems obvious to us in our cultural context. Therefore, Paul's statement that wives should submit to their husbands seems offensive to us, again, because of our context versus Paul's. In Paul's context, encouraging wives to respect their husbands was not offensive, nor was it radical. It was simply expected. What was offensive was what he told men, which is why he spends so much time elaborating on it. Paul tells husbands to sacrificially love their wives, like Christ loves the church to the point of death, like they love their own bodies. In other words, Paul doesn't say in Ephesians 5, we're not reading the whole thing, I'll put something here in just a second, but Paul doesn't say, wives, submit to your husbands, and husbands, rule over your wives. What Paul says is, wives, in essence, wives, sacrifice for your husbands. Husbands, sacrifice for your wives. Because your marriage is for something. That's what Paul's whole argument in Ephesians 5 is centered on. Your marriage is for something. What is it for? He tells husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Why? That he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Elsewhere, just a few verses later, he points to marriage as being the story of the gospel lived out on display, a profound mystery. What is your marriage for? In this passage, Paul is saying that your marriage is for the same purpose that Christ is married to the church. That husbands and wives love each other and sacrifice for one another in order that both partners would develop and grow into everything that God intended for them to be, and therefore bringing God all the glory that is rightly His. Again, I love this quote here from Keller. He says this. I love this thought because it's exactly what Paul's describing in Ephesians 5. He says, within this Christian view of marriage, here's what it means to fall in love. It is to look at another person and get a glimpse of the person God is creating and to say, I see who God is making you, and it excites me. Then he goes on to say this. I want to partner with you and God in the journey you are taking to His throne. And this is the thought that is what Paul is driving at in Ephesians 5, and it's so wonderful. And when we get there, I will look at your magnificence and say, I always knew you could be like this. I got glimpses of it on earth, but now look at you. When we think about marriage, what is your marriage for? Paul is saying in Ephesians 5 that your marriage is a partnership, that you are companions on the road to glory, and that God has brought you together as a team to grow and to develop into the kind of person and the kind of family that God always intended for you to be. And we won't be perfect. We're talking about forgiveness next week. But we can be living on that mission of following where Jesus leads, building relationships with others, modeling the gospel to them in word and deed, laughing together, talking together, enjoying one another's company, talking as friends. But most importantly, recapturing the reason God brought you together, to be companions on the road to glory, to look at each other and say, I see what God is doing in your life. I want to help you. I want you to help me. And when we get to the end, we'll say, I saw a glimpse of it in you. But now, look at you. Look and see what God has done. Continue to say, in other words, or begin to say anew, this is my beloved. This is my friend. You probably already know that Jesus is depicted as both the church's lover and friend. In Ephesians 5, Paul's using the marriage love relationship, but Jesus in John 15 talks to his disciples, I call you friends now. I don't call you servants, I call you my friends. Marriage is just one of the many ways that God points us back to the gospel itself. But even marriage, as wonderful as it is, cannot provide you with the ultimate cure for loneliness, with the ultimate companionship. It can't provide you with a sustaining purpose and an unshakable identity. And so we conclude this morning by simply urging me to consider, have I given my life to the King who loves me and who is my friend? A friend who is constant, a friend who is transparent, and a friend who is relentlessly dedicated to seeing me and you become all that we were ever made to be. Have you given your life to Christ? We want to offer you the invitation to come forward now as we stand and sing.